Today we are answering the question, is the Bible actually a code? Does it contain hidden messages? And most importantly, can this new way of looking at the Bible, can this new interpretation be used to unite the world's religions? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. It's going to be really good, and we're going to jump right into it. But as usual, please like and subscribe. Remember, this channel is more than just entertainment. It's about raising consciousness, and spreading this information helps humanity begin to realize what they are, where they are, why they are here, and leads to the creation of a new earth. So hitting like and subscribe, that helps. It has the algorithm spread the video around, and I appreciate it. It takes just a second, so go ahead and do that right now. Thank you. Also, I want you to be aware that we are having a members only video today. And if you want to support my channel and have access to our members only videos, and there's a new one every single week, you can just support over on patreon.com/MorgueOfficial. It really helps out a lot. That's how I'm able to create my work, do these videos, do my live streams, all that. So if you support at any tier on Patreon or tier 2 or higher right here on YouTube by hitting the join button below this video, you'll have access to all our members only videos. And today's members only video is on free will. Did you know a lot of scientists deny the fact that you have free will? They say free will doesn't exist. Is that true? We're going to be challenging free will deniers. So with that being said, let's see. Oh yes, remember there's scammers in the comments, people saying to join my WhatsApp, join my Telegram, whatever. I don't have those things, those platforms. I don't even know what they are, to be honest. So don't fall for it. It's much BS. Also, there are people in groups out there who don't like me and don't like what we're doing, and they're spreading a lot of disinformation and misinformation and hatred in general. So just, as always, use your head. Don't fall for the BS. Use logic and reason. All right, here we go, my friends. Is the Bible actually a code? Is there a hidden message in the Bible? Is there a new way that we could actually take a look at the Bible? And to answer this question, we're going to actually be looking at an article, and it's a very good one. So this article is called, let me bring it up on screen so you can see it real quick, A Completely Different Way to Understand the Bible. And this is written by Dan Foster on medium.com. So I'm going to be reading a few excerpts from this article to help us understand what's going on here. And so if you enjoy the excerpts that I read, go give Dan Foster a follow over on medium.com. All right, so what are we talking about here? What is this completely different way to understand the Bible? So Dan Foster right away says, the first time I suggested to one of my conservative Christian friends that I don't necessarily believe that the Bible is the 100% perfect, inerrant, literal word of God, he turned bright red with righteous indignation. How can you call yourself a Christian? He spat. So for those who don't know, I grew up in a strict religious Christian household. I was able to remove myself from it after a number of years, but I grew up a Christian. And so, yeah, there are many different types of Christians, and some people believe that the word of God is perfect. And that was what I believed. That was the kind of Christianity that I subscribed to, that I was taught, that the Bible was the perfect, inerrant, literal word of God. So it was pretty much looked at as though God himself wrote the Bible. The different authors of the Bible were just looked at as tools or instruments, the pens or quills, if you will, that God used to write the Bible. So yeah, I believed, and many Christians believe, that the Bible is the literal, perfect, inerrant word of God, can contain no errors whatsoever. Well, there are quite a lot of errors and contradictions in the Bible, let me tell you, but that's what we believe. That's what it was. So Dan continues here by saying, I believe that you can find value in the Bible even if you are not a believer. And he says the Bible has value when we learn to interpret it archetypally more than we interpret it literally. What the heck does that mean? Let me explain. All right, so let's talk about this for a minute. This is very interesting. So I've always heard, when I was growing up, I heard about the Bible containing codes. Like, oh, if you assign a number to every letter in the Bible, and if you count every fourth letter, it has a secret message. And of course, that's all BS. That's not true. It's completely made up. That's not the case. The Bible doesn't contain codes in that way. But what the Bible does contain is the fact that the stories in the Bible are not to be taken literally. They actually stand for something else, a true message, a more core message. And like Dan says, one can understand this by interpreting it archetypally. So now, what does it mean to interpret something archetypally? We talk about archetypes a lot on my channel, but real quick, if you maybe are seeing this for the first time or you haven't seen any videos when we talk about archetypes, let's explain what that means, all right? So what are archetypes? So put simply, they're universal characters and themes that appear in stories across all cultures and all times. So you can think of them kind of like the building blocks of storytelling, and they connect deeply with our emotions and our experiences. And the reason why they do is because not only are they the building blocks of storytelling, but they're also programs or structures in our mind. And this might seem complicated at first, but don't worry, it'll become easy to understand as we move forward. But this is key to understanding how to unlock or decode the Bible, understanding how archetypes work and the fact that it's reflecting what is going on inside, internally. And that's always the important part. It's always when you want to reach a higher consciousness, when you want to reach enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, it's about looking inwards, not externally, not to some external God in the sky, not to any person, not to anything external. It's all within, okay? So the reason why that archetypes are the building blocks of storytelling, but also programs in your mind, is because when people write stories, they're projecting the structure of their psyche into their stories metaphorically and symbolically. So it was actually Carl Jung who talked about the fact that the myths and legends that you find in the past reflect the particular consciousness or structure of the psyche of that time and that era. So let's be a little more specific. What are we talking about? Let's use some examples. So, for example, the hero is an archetype. So the hero is someone who faces adventures and overcomes challenges, okay? And so you'll notice that the hero is in a lot of different stories. The hero is in, there's always a hero. So you see how it's this universal pattern, this universal building block. You're going to watch a movie, you're going to read a story, you're going to take part in some sort of medium that is a story of some kind. There's usually a hero. Not always, but there usually is. It's a universal here. Okay? And you have another one like the mentor or the wise old man. Or if you don't want to say man, just the mentor. And that person is someone who guides people and shares wisdom and shares support. And then there's the shadow. And the shadow is usually the dark, evil character, the villain that adds a lot of conflict and tension to the story and is usually opposed to the hero. Okay? Now, what does this all have to do with our psyche? Well, the thing is archetypes aren't just characters and stories. They also represent different parts of our own mind. So if you imagine your mind like a big house, okay? Imagine your mind like a big house. And each room is filled with different characters. Now, these characters are the archetypes, and they can influence how we feel and act without even us realizing it. So just like you have a story with a bunch of different characters in it, you can imagine your psyche or your mind having a bunch of different characters in it. For example, the hero represents our inner drive to overcome obstacles and achieve our goals. So whenever you feel that motivation to tackle some kind of challenge or complete a project or stand up for something that you believe in, that's the hero archetype getting activated in your mind. And we're going to connect all this to the Bible, see, but you have to understand how to understand archetypes to be able to understand what the Bible is transmitting and how a lot of these texts, not just the Bible, but all of these religious texts are transmitting things archetypally. So you have to understand how to work with them, what they mean. So Another way to understand it, okay, is if it's a little confusing to think of archetypes as being like characters in a house, you can think of it in a different way, okay? So imagine that your mind is like your iPhone or smartphone or whatever. If your mind is a phone, then the archetypes are like the apps on your phone. All the different apps on your phone have a certain name, a certain symbol associated with them, and a certain function. So you might have the camera app called camera. You know, some apps aren't called, you know, so precisely what they are. They'll be called Vision Pro or Visor or whatever, some name. There's some name associated with them, and a symbol. Might be a old camera icon or something, and a function. When you activate the app, it allows you to take photos. But you have all kinds of different apps with different names, different symbols, and different functions, like a note-taking app, photo editing app, social media apps, etc. All these different apps allow you to do different things, allow your phone to do different things. They're the programs. So likewise, the archetypes of in your psyche are like the apps of your psyche. Okay. And so the hero is the app that gets activated. It's a part of you when you want to stand up for something that you believe in or want to overcome a challenge. You're activating that hero archetype, that hero app. Then you have the mentor. And the mentor, of course, symbolizes wisdom and guidance. So if you ever hear that inner voice offering you advice, right? Or when you are, seeking out guidance in your own mind, thinking things over, trying to rationally figure something out, trying to understand something from a higher perspective. You're activating that mentor aspect. Now, of course, there's the shadow, okay? And the shadow archetype is basically the reservoir for all the things that you don't like about yourself. That's kind of what the shadow is. You can almost think of the shadow as like the recycle bin on your computer. But the thing about the shadow is your recycle bin on the computer, you can empty it. The problem with the shadow is that it's a recycle bin that you cannot empty. So it's all the parts that you don't like about yourself that you don't even want to admit that you have. Things that were deemed as unacceptable by society. And so you deny the fact that they're a part of you and you put them in the trash. But the thing is that even if you deny that they exist, they'll still control your life. That app, that app will still be activated, even though it becomes a part of your shadow. And it can actually grow stronger because you're not dealing with it. So for example, a good example is anger. Let's say you have an anger problem. You get angry really easily, but you don't like that about yourself. And you don't want to admit that's part of yourself. So you deny that it exists. You go, I'm not an angry person. And so you do all these things to convince yourself you're not an angry person. You'll have, love and light, positive vibes only, etc. But then that anger that you haven't dealt with because you've denied that it exists will bubble up and you'll start, let's say, leaving really hateful comments on people's Instagrams or something when you get mad. Have you ever seen that before? Have you ever gotten a really hateful comment on social media and then check their profile and say, love and light only, positive vibes, smiley face, hearts and stars and all that, but they're really a very angry, bitter person. So that's the aspect of ourselves that we deny and don't admit to having, but that's not what we want to do. We want to be able to. So this video isn't about the shadow, but just to understand that the shadow is represented as a dark being most of the time, because it's the dark aspects of ourselves that we don't want to admit to having that challenge us. Okay. There's so many different archetypes, right? Like there's the trickster archetype, and the trickster archetype embodies things like humor, our ability to adapt to life situations by not taking it too seriously. It's the playful side. It's a trickster sort of archetype. There's also, there's a dark trickster archetype as well when you start to con people or manipulate people, etc. But all of these are programs in our mind, right? They're apps in our mind, apps in our psyche that allow us to do different things. All right. So let's move on, though, because we could talk about archetypes all day long, and it's a very important thing to discuss. How to handle archetypes, how to get archetypes to work together. You know, if you think of them as characters in a big house, sometimes they're going to all be fighting and conflicting with each other. The hero might want to do something that's the complete opposite of the shadow, where the trickster just wants to go watch a funny movie or something and not give a crap about something that the hero. So you have all these forces in your mind, all these apps in your mind, they can conflict with each other. So the goal is to get them to all work together in harmony, working together in harmony so that you're having a life that is moving you towards your goals and you're having a more fulfilling life. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about how this is revealed in the Bible. So it's important to understand that when we read stories or watch movies that have these characters in them, they resonate with us because they're already a part of our own psyche. They're the programs running in the background of our minds. And so it's all within us. So when we see it in the story form, it resonates with us. It resonates with us because it's a part of us. It was a part of someone else. Everyone has these archetypes, and they put their archetypes into a story form. We read that story, and it mirrors our own structure of the psyche. So the idea here is that the Bible can actually be viewed in a different way, not as being literally true, right? There are a lot of crazy stories. There's talking snakes and talking donkeys, people being raised from the dead, walking on water, multiplying fish. There's a lot of insanity in the Bible, all right? So what we want to do is not view the Bible literally. That will make you go crazy. You'll believe in things that are impossible. What we need to do is view the Bible as an archetypal code. And once we do that, we can actually gain something positive from it. And we can use this understanding to unite world religions, because it's not just the Bible that's an archetypal code. It's all the world's religions and their holy books that are an archetypal code. So this is why all religions actually have a common underlying structure, because they all share the same archetypal code. Now, of course, when it gets taken literally, then that's when you have problems. Then that's when you have religions going to war with each other, because they're taking it literally rather than understanding it's an archetypal code that reflects the structure of the psyche. So the Bible, when we understand it this way, means that its stories and characters and events are symbolic representations of the universal patterns, the patterns that we all share that exist in the human psyche. And this is why the Bible resonates with a lot of people, because it reflects the underlying structures within us. This is why a lot of stories resonate with individuals, and you will be more attracted. Think about your favorite movie. Think about your favorite book. Your movie or your favorite book resonates with you more than other books and movies. Why? Because it's likely closer to the structure of your own psyche. The books and movies that you like the most very likely reflect your psyche and how it's structured. If you are someone who's, really against the status quo and wants to overturn things, maybe you'll like the movie Fight Club. If you are someone who likes to see the lighter side of life and you like to laugh a lot and you're a jokester, you'll probably like I'm trying to think of a popular comedy. I don't know too many comedies. What are some of my favorite comedies? I like Anchorman. Anchorman's pretty funny. Napoleon Dynamite is a classic. Yeah, I don't watch too many comedies. I don't watch that many movies. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. The characters that you relate to the most, the books that you relate to the most, the movies you relate to the most. This is because their story, what they're trying to get across resonates with you in some way and your structure of the psyche. Because we all have these archetypes within us, but obviously we're not all robots. We're not all exactly the same, just like not all stories are exactly the same, even though they use common archetypes, universal archetypes. So when we think about things like, to do a more concrete example, right? Think of a movie like Star Wars. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is the hero. And he represents that archetype, the hero archetype. He's facing dark forces. He's overcoming challenges. He's standing up for what he believes in. He's the hero archetype. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda are the mentor archetypes. They're the one guiding him. They're the one instructing him, helping him along the way, being there for support. You have Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine that represent the shadow, the dark side. And we can understand, and you see, I could talk about this stuff for hours. I don't know if I want to get into this. I like Star Wars a lot, by the way. Star Wars, I'm a fairly big Star Wars fan. I like Star Wars a lot. One thing that I don't quite like about Star Wars, though, or I don't know if I would say I don't like about it, but I guess a criticism of some kind is the strict separation between like the light and the dark, right? Oh, here are the good guys, even though I know that the Jedi have a lot of dark things that they do and they're corrupt in a lot of way. I'm letting my inner nerd come out here. But anyway, let's for the most part, you have the light side and the dark side. Light side good, dark side bad, right? And these are archetypal forces. But in truth, if you want to have a healthy psyche, it's about merging the two. Accepting your shadow and using it in a positive way. So if Star Wars were represented archetypally in a more healthy way, it would involve a character who was a Jedi using the power of the dark side to do good things. So, and that would represent taking one's dark side, acknowledging that it exists rather than getting it away, because Jedi are trained to not have any emotions and live a celibate life. Well, you're denying a huge part of yourself. So for it to be more psychologically healthy, it would be about integrating the darkness and using it, embracing it, but using it in a positive way. All right. So I just want to point that out because that's a way to show that even though stories use archetypes, it doesn't mean that the stories automatically reflect a healthy psyche. Star Wars reflects a very divided psyche. But these archetypes are common. And the reason why I'm explaining all this is because I want you guys to be able to see how to relate archetypes to stories so that we can look at this in terms of the Bible and what it's getting across through its archetypal code. So then you have movies like, or stories in general, like Lord of the Rings. So in Lord of the Rings, Frodo is the hero. And what does Frodo have to do? Frodo has a goal that he has to accomplish. He has to destroy the One Ring. So here, the hero is Frodo rather than Luke Skywalker. Then you have Gandalf, who's the mentor. Gandalf offers wisdom to Frodo and protection. So instead of Obi-Wan Kenobi, we have Gandalf, same archetype, just presented in a different way in the story. And then, of course, you have Sauron, who represents the shadow. And Sauron represents the shadow and the darkness. And that would be, the Darth Vader of this story. But again, there's a very strict divide between, and you'll notice this in a lot of classic stories, there's a very strict divide between the good guys and the bad guys. And the bad guys just must be defeated. When the bad guys represent the shadow, and the truth is this needs to be integrated because you can't destroy the shadow. You can't. Like I said, you can put it in the recycle bin, but you can't empty the recycle bin. It'll come back and it'll direct your fate. You need to be able to embrace it and use its power. So to be more psychologically correct, Frodo perhaps would have used the power of the ring to build a better world. Now, of course, I know in story that wouldn't happen because the ring automatically corrupts people and Frodo would be evil and blah, blah, blah. I know that. But I'm just saying this idea of good versus bad is kind of a very old way of looking at things. Like Nietzsche said, we need to go beyond good and evil. We need to think beyond these terms because all of us have this dark side that we cannot get rid of. We have to deal with it in some way, learn to work with it. So, and you'll notice the Bible is the same in this way. There's a very big divide between the good guys and the bad guys. God good, Satan bad. Angels good, demons evil. So these archetypes, this is why stories are relatable. And this is why we're able to resonate with them. Okay. But now what I want to do is look at some more excerpts, because let's actually look at the Bible itself, right? So here's some more quotes from Dan Foster's article. So let's actually dive into the Bible here now that we understand what archetypes are. So real quick, he says, think of archetypes as the basic building blocks of characters. Yeah. I'll read this so that you can see Dan's explanation as well. Think of archetypes as the basic building blocks of characters that show up again and again in stories and myths, and even in real life. They're like the models or common patterns that we see repeated throughout different cultures and time. For example, the hero who goes on a journey, the wise old mentor, and the trickster are all archetypes. All right. That's exactly what we talked about. And he goes on to explain everything that we already talked about, how we can relate to them and recognize them because they reflect our own internal structures. So Dan says, what if each of the characters in the Bible had something to teach us about what it means to be human as well? What if we're supposed to find ourselves hidden in the pages of the sacred text? And see, this is what I want to say again to reiterate. What if we are supposed to find ourselves hidden in the pages of the sacred text? Because remember, these are archetypes that reflect our own inner models, our own inner structure, our own inner psyche. It says, instead of getting caught up in debates about whether this story or that story in the Bible happened exactly as it was written, what if we took a step back and asked ourselves, what did they teach me about being human? So Dan says, take Noah's Ark, for instance, or just Noah. Instead of obsessing over the logistics of fitting all those animals on an ark, think about what the story symbolizes. A fresh start after a storm, the importance of perseverance, and the power of hope in the face of adversity. Can't we relate to all that? So he's saying that instead of arguing about, did Noah's Ark really happen? Can we really fit all the animals on there? Look and see what archetypal message the story is conveying. It would be like, reading Lord of the Rings. And let's say that a lot of people believed that Lord of the Rings was true. And they would argue about, oh, well, how did Frodo really have the strength to walk that many miles? He would have been tired and whatever, right? Like arguing over weird details. When instead you look at the lessons that it's trying to teach you, the hidden message within it that is what matters, overcoming challenges and perseverance and growing and standing up for what you believe in, things like that. So, he continues by saying, if you want to, let's see here. So this is interesting. So if you want to read the full biblical narrative, go back and check out Genesis. Otherwise, here's a summary. So we're talking about Adam and Eve, right? So let's take a look at Adam and Eve. It says, God created Adam and Eve and situated them in the Garden of Eden, giving them dominion over the entire place and everything in it. Virtually the only thing that God requires of Adam and Eve is that they do not eat from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. It says, let me ask you, archetypally, whenever you're reading a story and a character is forbidden from doing something, what will inevitably happen? Obviously, curiosity gets the better of them, and they end up doing the one thing that they're not supposed to do. It's the oldest tale in the book, literally. Despite given dominion over everything in the garden, Adam and Eve are drawn to the one thing that they're forbidden from touching, the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when they take the bite, they realize something. They're naked. They feel exposed, vulnerable, and ashamed. In a frantic attempt to cover up their newfound awareness, they hastily fashioned clothing from fig leaves, hoping to hide their perceived imperfections from God and each other. Now, you can waste your breath arguing about whether or not Adam and Eve were real people, or whether or not this story literally happened if you want to. But it turns out that you don't need to believe it literally, because the story of Adam and Eve still has incredible value for explaining the human condition archetypally. So, he goes on to explain how Adam and Eve represents the archetypes of the innocents. Let me hold on. Let's see. So he says that Adam and Eve represent the archetype of the innocent. As children, we begin our journey with a sense of wonder and curiosity, exploring the world around us, etc., etc. So he gives a way to interpret the story of the Garden of Eden. Okay, but let's talk about this real quick, because I want to bring in Gnosticism. We talk about Gnosticism a lot on my channel, and Gnosticism is a lot more clearly archetypal. And so what I mean by that is the Gnostics weren't so much obsessed with literalist interpretations. They wanted to know the message behind things. So there's a lot of banned Gnostic texts, the Secret Book of John and the Testimony of Truth and the Apocalypse of Adam. There are many, many, many banned Gnostic texts. And, well, they were once banned. They're not banned anymore, but the church banned them and considered them a heresy. Now, today, a lot of people criticize the Gnostic texts. And why? Well, there's a number of reasons why they criticize the Gnostic texts. But one of the reasons why they criticize the Gnostic texts is because they say, well, they're not consistent. The stories aren't consistent. For example, in the Secret Book of John, Jesus Christ appears in the Garden of Eden and gives Adam and Eve the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or convinced them to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It was Jesus. However, in another gospel or Gnostic book in general, it is basically Eve's higher self, Eve's spiritual aspect that convinces her to eat from the tree of knowledge. And there's a lot of things like this in Gnosticism, where the different books, they have an overall theme and pattern, but the little details like that are different. And so Christians go, oh, look, these books are obviously false. They contradict each other, blah, blah, blah. Well, see, Gnostics weren't really concerned about building a consistent narrative, because they were more concerned with the fundamental archetypal truth that they were trying to express. And so in Gnosticism, everything is a code, everything is a metaphor, everything is an allegory. The Garden of Eden actually represents a state of ignorance. And eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil represents gaining awareness of the self. And then so when you exit the Garden of Eden, you are exiting that lower form of consciousness, that innocent form of consciousness, and into an expanded form of consciousness. Now you're in the world, but the world has a lot of difficulties. It's not like the Garden of Eden where everything is easy and innocent. When you start to gain higher awareness, it comes with a lot of challenges, a lot of stresses, and a lot of anxieties. You have to worry about a lot more things, like a dog is just running around happy being a dog. That dog is living in the Garden of Eden, so to speak. It's just not worrying about anything. It's just running around eating and pooping and licking things. That's what a dog does. And it's very cute. Dogs are great. I love dogs. I like cats more, though, to be perfectly honest with you. There are only, I don't like all dogs. I mean, theoretically, I like them, but like as far as enjoying having them around me, as in, would I want one as a pet? Not really. I much prefer cats. But in general, I like all animals. I'm vegan, after all. So I digress. But you can see that a dog is living in the Garden of Eden, so to speak, running around, eating and pooping and wagging its tail and chasing a ball. It doesn't have to worry about paying rent. It doesn't have to worry about wars going on in the world. It doesn't have to worry about, that big project at work that you have to finish. So when you gain knowledge, you enter into a more expansive world where you're no longer confined in the Garden of Eden, but with it, of course, comes a lot of challenges, and you can't return back to that state anymore. You're now in this wider state with all the challenges that you face. So basically, when we look at the Bible, we can understand it archetypally. Now, the thing about this is this means we stop looking at it literally and start to see what we can learn from for it in an archetypal way, in stories and symbolism and metaphor. Okay? And the fact is that all of the holy texts in the world can be interpreted in that way, as archetypal and metaphorical and symbolic. So, Jesus Christ would represent the hero, right? Jesus Christ is like the hero character, facing challenges, overcoming things, standing up for what he believes in. You have Satan that represents the shadow. You have different prophets, perhaps, like Moses, that represents the mentor. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I'm not saying that this is all strictly the case. But you have all these archetypes that the Bible contains within it. Okay? I personally actually look at Jesus Christ and Lucifer as being the same archetype, because Jesus Christ and Lucifer both embody the liberator archetype, the archetype of not just being a hero, they are a hero, but going so far as to attempt to liberate humanity and give them the knowledge they need to reach divinity. So they are that hero archetype, they are that liberator archetype. And that's why I say we are the second coming of Christ. Because every single one of us who wants to help the world understand what it is, where it is, why they're here, to help people reach a higher consciousness, every single one of us, we are embodying that hero archetype, that liberator archetype, that Christ archetype, to help people understand what they are. So that's what I mean when I say we're the second coming of Christ. We are the light of Lucifer. We are the liberator. We are the heroes. We are the saviors of ourselves. There's no one coming to save us down from the clouds. We're here to do it right here and now. It's an aspect of us in our psyche. And we can learn from these things. So when we understand it this way, when we start understanding texts in this fashion, then we can understand that, and that's what we need to do in order to solve the problem of religion. Because right now, religion is destroying the world. We can't just erase religion. That's impossible. There's no way to do it. You cannot. It's like the shadow. You can't get rid of the shadow. You can't get rid of a certain aspect of the psyche. You can't destroy energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed. So we have to transform religion by looking at the stories as being metaphors and allegories rather than being literally true. And so you don't have to argue about whose God is the real God. You can realize that God is a symbol that represents the same archetype in every religion. So it's really silly the way that religions fight each other these days and start war, well, have done for thousands and thousands of years. It would be as silly as people going to war with each other. Let's say a group of people that believe in Lord of the Rings and another group of people that believe in Star Wars going to war with each other because they're like, oh no, Luke Skywalker is the hero, and oh, it's Frodo, and they go to war and they kill each other and they commit awful war crimes. And when really, first of all, these characters don't exist, and they represent the same thing. They both represent the hero archetype. So you have factions fighting each other that are actually founded on the same underlying structure. So in order to transform religion, we have to reinterpret religion in a more metaphorical, symbolic, archetypal way. And of course, completely deny all the parts of it that are outdated and backwards and harmful. Because just because we can interpret the Bible metaphorically and symbolically doesn't mean that everything in it is positive. There's still horrible things in it. There's things in the Bible that say, women are lesser than men. It promotes slavery. There's lots of things that I can't say on stream right now, but imagine the most horrible things you can possibly imagine. They're in the Bible. Really bad stuff. So of course we want to acknowledge, hey, that's not good. And understand that we need to evolve past that. And if we realize the Bible's not literally true, that's fine. We can realize, oh, well, this was written by humans who at the time were had some very negative views and promoted them in these scriptures. So in order to transform religion, we need to have the metaphorical archetypal understanding of it, move past and reject the outdated backwards ideas in them, and recognize the underlying archetypal structure that unites them all together. Because remember, these are all just projections of the psyche. These are all just projections of the psyche. And so they represent the same underlying truth, but we always have to remember that they are interpretations as well. And people can have different interpretations. And just because they might archetypally represent something doesn't mean it's always healthy. So, for example, Star Wars is a really great story. But, and it's extremely archetypal. It's a very good story and extremely archetypal, but it doesn't reflect a healthy psyche. It reflects a very divided psyche. It's literally the light side versus the dark side. It's extremely divided. When a healthy structure would be about integrating the two together in a healthy way. So we always have to remember that even though there's a story being archetypally told in the Bible, doesn't mean that it's healthy. And it can be interpreted in a different way. That's why you have Gnosticism that interpreted Christianity in the complete opposite way as we understand it today. They looked at the God of the Bible as being an evil being. So remember the story of Noah's Ark? How Dan said you can, I forget how Dan worded it. You can think of it like, what did Dan say? For Noah's Ark? And it can symbolize a fresh start after a storm, the importance of perseverance and the power of hope. And yeah, you could absolutely do that. The Gnostics, however, looked at it in a completely different way. The Gnostics looked at the flood and Noah's Ark as being representative of ignorance. So in that story, you had, in the Gnostic story, they interpreted the flood as being covering the world in ignorance because they looked at the God of the Bible as being evil. And so their idea was that people were becoming too conscious. Their story, right? Their story is that people were becoming too conscious and refusing to worship the Creator God. So the Creator God flooded the world in an attempt to destroy them and save Noah and his family because Noah and his family agreed to be God's slaves in exchange for becoming kings and all their generations ruling the world. So in Gnosticism, you have it symbolizing a battle of consciousness, the forces of knowledge and gnosis versus the forces of ignorance. And you have this theme all throughout Gnosticism with the archons and the eons, the archons representing the negative aspect of our psyche and the eons representing the positive aspect of our psyche, and we having to overcome them. But again, it's a light versus dark sort of thing, even in Gnosticism. So that's a failure in Gnosticism, in my opinion, is that Gnosticism is much healthier than modern Christianity, absolutely, but it still is not about integrating the archons. It's about overcoming the archons in Gnosticism. It's about and this leads to a lot. So for example, there are some Gnostics, the Sethian Gnostics, they didn't they were very against sex. And this is because they believed that they were trapping souls in the material world, and they looked at the material world as being evil. They looked at the material world as being evil and a prison, so they didn't want to have intercourse because they didn't want to have children and trap more souls in this evil prison planet is what they looked at, how they looked at it. But that's not a very healthy way to understand reality. And if you start limiting yourselves like that, you're limiting yourself to the experiences that you can have in life. Rather, instead of matter being looked at as evil, you look at it as a training ground, a school. This world isn't a prison, it's a school. It's a place where we learn, grow, and understand. We localize to acquire training data so that we can have a more maximized and optimized soul. Optimize our energetic structures, our energetic functions, our frequency functions in higher patterns to be able to create higher thought structures and reach new concepts through the understanding and experiences, the training data, so to speak, that we acquire in this world. But I digress. The main point here is that you can interpret archetypal stories differently. Dan interpreted the story of Noah's Ark as something positive. The Gnostics looked at it as a flood of ignorance. But that's okay. When you look at these stories metaphorically and allegorically and symbolically, you don't have to become obsessed with, oh, what does it really mean? Right? It's not about what does it really mean. It's about what can it teach you. So what resonates with you more? The story of Noah's Ark being a fresh start after a storm, or it being a flood of ignorance in the battle of ignorance versus consciousness and awareness. And that's okay to have different interpretations. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as people aren't acting on, in negative ways. So that's key things to understand, is that they can be interpreted differently, and that's okay. Also, just because there's a story in the Bible or some religious text, even archetypally, doesn't mean that it represents a healthy structure. You still need to use logic and reason and be like, does this really help me? Does this really make sense? Just like I said, like the story of Star Wars. Star Wars is a great story, extremely archetypal. But if we used it as a guide on how to live life, we would be fighting against the shadow, and that's not going to work. You can't destroy the shadow. You can only integrate it, which means dealing with it. So, for example, if you have an anger problem, just denying that you have an anger problem and putting it in the shadow isn't going to make the anger problem go away. It's just going to come back and take control over you. You're going to have angry outbursts. It's going to be a problem. You have to acknowledge it. You have to go, hey, guess what? I have an anger problem, and I need to deal with it. And then you find a way to deal with it. You can go to therapy. You can use it in a healthy way. For example, you can channel it into art by making music or videos that channels your aggression. You can use it as a force for world change, to use it as motivation, to get involved in causes that you care about. You see now how you're not denying your dark side, you're integrating it. You're using that power. Just like in Star Wars, that would be like a Jedi using the dark side to do positive things. And in some Star Wars stories, these are known as gray Jedis. Again, a little nerdy, but that's not official. Gray Jedi are not canon, but they are in stories, but those stories aren't canon. Anyway, if Gray Jedi were canon, that would be a healthy psychological structure reflected in the archetypal system that is Star Wars. My point is, just because an archetypal structure is interesting and resonates doesn't mean that it reflects a healthy structure. So we need to look at these things critically. We need to understand them critically. But if we all understand that they're metaphorical and allegorical and that we all have different interpretations of it, now we live in a world where we're not going to war with each other because we're taking things to be literally true. We're not going to war with each other because it's like, oh, well, it's Jesus who's king and versus all the other, I don't want to get too much into, specific religious discussions, but you understand the different conflicts that are occurring and that occur right now in the world based on religion because it's taken literally. When we understand it metaphorically, we can start to move towards a healthier understanding of ourselves and the world and have a more united system. And that's exactly what we need to do. So it's very important to understand that when we approach these stories, that's why when we talk about Gnosticism, we talk about Gnosticism a lot on my channel, but I always say, hey, these stories aren't literally true. There aren't, the Yaldabaoth doesn't literally exist as it's described in Gnosticism as being the creator of this planet and literally trapping souls on Earth with an army of archons. No, Yaldabaoth represents a structure in the psyche. And this is a good way to talk about interpretation. You can interpret Yaldabaoth as being the shadow, the dark side, all the negative aspects that we need to integrate. But see, Yaldabaoth is also powerful. Yaldabaoth has the power of creation, just like the dark side in Star Wars is powerful. So you can integrate it to use that power. You can also look at Yaldabaoth as the ego. The ego, because the ego says, I'm the real self, I'm the true self. There is only me. When that's not true at all, you're actually the higher self, and the ego is just a servant of the higher self. Where Yaldabaoth in Gnosticism goes, I'm the one true God. There is no God but me. When that's not true. Yaldabaoth is a lesser deity within the mind of the one, which is the true God, the mind of divine light. Where Yaldabaoth is the function that rules over the material world. And so you see that there's different ways to interpret these stories. So they're like dreams. When you have dreams, there are different ways to interpret the dream. And you need to interpret them in the way that resonates with you the most and that helps your life. Because look, when you step back and look at all this, what matters is what helps you live a better life. People are always so obsessed with like looking for secret codes and all this like, oh, does it predict the coming of the Antichrist and blah, 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 blah. And what has been the message for thousands and thousands of years? Know thyself. Know thyself. Know thyself. It doesn't, all this other stuff doesn't matter. It's, does it help you grow? Does it help you live a better life? Does it help us create a better world? That's what matters. So when you're doing dream interpretation, does this dream interpretation resonate with me? Does it help me learn more about myself? Does it help me live a better life? When you read stories like this, does it help me live a better life? You can get just as much, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings might help you more than the Bible. You might be more inspired or think about your favorite movie. Think about your favorite book. Can you use that as inspiration? Can you tap into the archetypes represented in those books, in those movies, to understand yourself better and live a better life? That's what it's all about. That's what it means. So it's important not to get obsessed with finding weird codes and stuff. But if you want to do that as a hobby, that's fine. There's a lot of interesting things one can do as a hobby. And if it's like, ooh, it's fun, let's see if we can find a thing that might be in here. I don't believe that there really is, but if some people do and you want to do that, nothing wrong with that. As long as you realize that's secondary. What is primary is how we can use these stories to improve our lives and improve our world and end conflict. Because ultimately, these stories are causing a lot of conflict. So we need to get to the point where it's explicitly acknowledged that these stories are stories. So I've gone on for this for a long time, my friends. I hope that you have enjoyed this. And if you want like actual interpretations of certain stories, let me know. Tell me in the comments what stories you'd like to hear. But check out my channel. There are so many videos on archetypes and the structure of the mind, as well as mini playlists on Gnosticism. Go check them out. And of course, please like and subscribe so that more people see this information and hear this information. It's very important for raising the consciousness of humanity and creating the new earth. As Neogenians, we want to institute the new beginning. And we're having a members only video, by the way, right now, and it's all about free will. You know, there are scientists out there who actually deny that you have free will. So we're going to be challenging that. Is that true? Why did they say we don't have free will? Is it possible that free will is an illusion, or does it actually exist? That's what we're going to be exploring. So support over on patreon.com/MorgueOfficial at any tier, or tier 2 or higher right here on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video. Hey, it helps out a lot. That's how I'm able to do these videos at all. So if you find value in my work, consider supporting. But as always, remember, this isn't church, so you don't have to. You're not going to go to hell if you don't. You're not going to be, you know, you don't have to do that. It helps out a lot, and I really appreciate it. But there are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking and subscribing and sharing. And I do want to shout out those who support. It means a lot to me, means the world to me. Thank you all so much, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Fashida, Enki, Nusalina, Masam, Eric Fire, Christopher, the Eternal Empire, and everyone else. Thank you very much.